Close your eyes for a moment and think about this. What if everything you've ever struggled with, every limit you've ever faced, and every obstacle standing in your way wasn't outside of you at all? What if the most powerful weapon to change your life, to break through fear, and to create the success you've always dreamed of has been with you all along? Today, I'm going to show you how to unlock it, how to harness it, and how to use it to completely transform the way you think, feel, and act. If you pay attention to what I'm about to share, by the end of this speech, you won't just think differently, you'll begin to see the world differently, and your life will begin to follow. Stay with me, because what you learn here is not just motivation, it's the blueprint for mastering the most powerful force you own. Your mind is the command center of your life, because every emotion you experience is first created by a thought. Nothing reaches your body, your behavior, or your results without passing through your mental filter. The way you interpret events determines how you feel about them, and those feelings then push you into action or inaction. Two people can experience the same situation, yet respond in completely different ways, not because the situation is different, but because their minds interpret it differently. This is why emotions are not caused by events themselves, but by the meaning your mind assigns to those events. When your mind focuses on threat, loss, or limitation, your emotional state shifts into fear, anxiety, or frustration. These emotions trigger defensive behaviors such as hesitation, avoidance, or self-sabotage. Over time, repeated emotional reactions form habits, and habits slowly shape the direction of your life. If your mind repeatedly tells you that something is impossible, your emotions will drain your energy before you even attempt to act. On the other hand, when your mind interprets challenges as opportunities for growth, your emotional state becomes empowered, alert, and focused, creating momentum instead of resistance. Emotions are powerful because they influence the quality of your actions. A person acting from confidence will move decisively, communicate clearly, and persist through obstacles. A person acting from doubt will hesitate, overthink, and quit early, even when the opportunity is real. The difference is not ability, intelligence, or resources, but emotional state, and that emotional state is controlled by mental focus. The mind sends signals to the nervous system, and the nervous system prepares the body either for progress or for retreat. Most people try to change their actions without ever addressing the thoughts that create their emotional patterns. This approach fails because behavior cannot be sustained without emotional alignment. Lasting change happens when the mind is trained to generate empowering emotions on demand. By consciously choosing where attention goes and how experiences are interpreted, emotional responses begin to shift naturally. Once emotions change, actions follow effortlessly because the internal resistance disappears. Every decision you make, from small daily choices to life-changing commitments, is driven by how you feel in that moment. Those feelings are not random. They are the direct result of mental conditioning built over time. When the mind is disciplined, emotions become a source of strength instead of instability, and actions become deliberate rather than reactive. What you focus on determines what your mind searches for and what it begins to magnify in your experience. The human brain is designed to filter reality, not absorb it all, and it does this based on where attention is consistently placed. When focus is directed toward problems, the mind becomes highly efficient at finding more reasons to feel stuck, overwhelmed, or limited. Situations that were once neutral begin to feel heavy because the brain is now trained to notice obstacles instead of possibilities. This is not imagination or coincidence. It is how perception shapes reality through repeated attention. Focus acts like a lens that enlarges whatever it is pointed at. If that lens is locked on fear, the world appears dangerous and uncertain. If it is fixed on lack, nothing ever seems enough. Over time, the mind builds emotional patterns around these focal points, reinforcing them as personal truths. This is why people often feel trapped in cycles of negativity even when external conditions improve. Their environment changes, but their focus does not, so their internal experience remains the same. When focus shifts toward growth, solutions, and progress, the brain activates different neural pathways. It begins to connect ideas, notice resources, and recognize opportunities that were previously invisible. Challenges do not disappear, but they are processed differently. Instead of triggering stress and avoidance, they stimulate curiosity and problem solving. This change in focus alters emotional state, which then influences how a person speaks, moves, and decides. The same world is experienced in a completely different way because attention has been retrained. Focus is also closely tied to identity. What you consistently think about becomes what you believe about yourself. A person who focuses on past failures reinforces a self-image of limitation, while someone who focuses on lessons learned builds a sense of capability and resilience. The mind does not distinguish between real and imagined repetition. It strengthens whatever patterns are most frequently rehearsed. This is why conscious focus is one of the most powerful tools for personal transformation. Daily life is filled with distractions competing for attention, and without intentional focus, the mind defaults to familiar patterns. These patterns often reflect fear, habit, or emotional conditioning rather than conscious choice. Training focus requires awareness and discipline, but once mastered, it becomes a force that shapes perception, emotion, and behavior. As focus changes, experience expands, and what once felt impossible gradually becomes achievable. The conversation you have with yourself every day is shaping your identity, your confidence, and the limits you place on your life. Internal dialogue is not just background noise, it is a constant stream of instructions being given to your mind and nervous system. When those instructions are negative, critical, or filled with doubt, the brain treats them as reality and adjusts behavior accordingly. A person who repeatedly tells themselves they are not good enough begins to move, speak, and decide in ways that confirm that belief, even when evidence suggests otherwise. Words carry emotional weight, especially when they are spoken internally with repetition and certainty. The mind does not question familiar thoughts, it accepts them as facts. This is why self-talk becomes self-fulfilling. If your internal dialogue says failure is inevitable, your emotional state shifts into hesitation and fear. That emotional state then drives actions that lack commitment, consistency, or courage. Over time, these actions produce results that reinforce the original belief, creating a closed loop that feels impossible to escape. Positive internal dialogue does not mean ignoring reality or pretending challenges do not exist. It means choosing language that empowers rather than weakens. Reframing thoughts from "I can't handle this" to "I will find a way to handle this" changes emotional response immediately. The situation may remain difficult, but the mind shifts from helplessness to resourcefulness. That shift opens access to creativity, focus, and resilience that were previously blocked by negative language. Internal dialogue also influences how the brain interprets feedback and setbacks. When self-talk is harsh, mistakes are experienced as proof of inadequacy. When it is constructive, mistakes are processed as information. This difference determines whether a person grows or withdraws. The mind listens closely to how it is spoken to, and it responds with either expansion or contraction based on that tone. Most people are unaware of their internal dialogue because it has been running on autopilot for years. It is shaped by past experiences, social conditioning, and emotional memories. Becoming aware of this dialogue is the first step toward change. Once awareness is developed, language can be consciously chosen and repeated until it becomes natural. As internal dialogue shifts, emotional patterns change, and with them, behavior and outcomes begin to transform in subtle but powerful ways. Most of the boundaries people believe they have are created by thought patterns rather than actual limitations. The mind is skilled at turning temporary experiences into permanent conclusions, especially after failure, rejection, or emotional pain. When something does not work once or twice, the brain often labels it as impossible and stores it as a rule. These rules then operate silently in the background, influencing decisions long after the original experience has passed. What feels like a hard external limit is often nothing more than an old mental conclusion that has never been questioned. Physical limitations are real, but they are far fewer than people assume. The body is capable of adapting far beyond what the mind initially believes. In many cases, people stop not because they have reached their true limit, but because discomfort triggers fear, and fear is interpreted as danger. The mind's primary function is protection, not growth, so it exaggerates risk to keep a person within familiar territory. This protective mechanism becomes a barrier when it is mistaken for truth. External circumstances are often used as justification for staying stuck, yet many individuals have succeeded under conditions far more difficult than average. This contrast reveals that circumstances themselves are not the deciding factor. What matters is how those circumstances are interpreted. When challenges are viewed as proof of inability, effort decreases. When they are seen as tests or training, effort increases. The same obstacle can either stop progress or strengthen capability, depending on the mental framework applied to it. Mental limits also shape perception of time, energy, and potential. A person who believes they are too late, too old, or too inexperienced begins to conserve effort rather than invest it. This belief reduces action, which then produces little evidence of progress, reinforcing the original assumption. The limitation feels real because it produces real results, but it was created by belief rather than fact. Breaking mental limits requires conscious examination of assumptions that have been accepted without evidence. When beliefs are challenged, new possibilities emerge. The mind begins to separate discomfort from danger and effort from failure. As this separation develops, action becomes less emotionally heavy and more deliberate. Gradually, behaviors expand, confidence increases, and what once felt impossible becomes manageable through consistent action and reframed perception. The questions you consistently ask yourself determine where your mind goes and what it searches for. The brain is a problem-solving machine, and whenever a question is asked, it immediately begins looking for answers, whether those answers are empowering or destructive. When questions are weak, limiting, or emotionally charged in a negative way, the mind produces responses that reinforce fear, blame, or helplessness. A person who repeatedly asks, "Why does this always happen to me?" trains their brain to find reasons they are unlucky or powerless, even if those reasons are exaggerated or untrue. Questions shape emotional state because they control focus. Asking, "Why am I failing?" directs attention toward mistakes and shortcomings, which generates frustration, discouragement. Asking, "What can I do differently right now?" directs attention towards solutions and action, which creates clarity and momentum. The external situation may be identical, but the internal experience changes instantly based on the question being asked. This shift in emotional state then influences behavior, decision-making, and persistence. Most people are not aware of the questions running through their minds because they have become habitual. These questions are often formed during moments of stress, disappointment, or comparison with others. Over time, they become automatic mental scripts that guide reactions without conscious choice. The danger is that the mind treats repeated questions as instructions, not curiosities. If the questions imply limitation, the answers will support limitation. If the questions imply possibility, the answers will expand perception. High-quality questions create high-quality thinking. When the mind is asked empowering questions, it begins to access creativity, memory, and logic in a more productive way. Questions like, "What am I learning from this?" or "How can this make me stronger?" do not deny difficulty, but they change how difficulty is processed. Instead of triggering emotional shutdown, they activate growth-oriented thinking. This allows a person to remain engaged rather than overwhelmed. Questions also influence identity. A person who asks themselves, "Who am I becoming through this challenge?" begins to see life as a process of development rather than judgment. This reduces fear of failure and increases willingness to act. Over time, consistent questioning patterns reshape beliefs, emotional responses, and confidence. The mind adapts to the direction it is repeatedly pointed toward. When questions are consciously chosen, thinking becomes intentional rather than reactive, and life begins to shift in alignment with those mental commands. Success is not created by occasional bursts of motivation, but by the thoughts that are repeated day after day. The mind is shaped through consistency, and whatever ideas are reinforced regularly become dominant patterns that influence behavior automatically. When empowering thoughts are practiced consistently, they form mental habits that guide decisions even in moments of stress or uncertainty. In contrast, inconsistent thinking creates emotional instability, causing a person to feel confident one day and doubtful the next, making progress unpredictable and difficult to sustain. The brain strengthens what it repeatedly experiences. Thoughts that are revisited frequently become easier to access, while neglected thoughts weaken over time. This is why consistent thinking is more powerful than intense thinking. A single moment of inspiration cannot compete with daily repetition. When beliefs about discipline, growth, and possibility are reinforced consistently, they become part of a person's identity rather than temporary motivation. Actions then feel natural instead of forced because they are supported by internal alignment. Consistency of thought also stabilizes emotional states. A person who repeatedly focuses on long-term purpose is less affected by short-term setbacks. When the mind returns to the same empowering framework each day, emotions recover faster after disappointment. This emotional stability allows for steady action without being derailed by external circumstances. Without consistent thought patterns, emotions fluctuate, and those fluctuations interrupt progress by encouraging impulsive decisions or avoidance. Habits are formed not only by physical actions, but by mental repetition. Thinking in a disciplined way builds mental routines that operate automatically. Over time, these routines influence how challenges are interpreted and how effort is applied. A person with consistent, success-oriented thinking approaches obstacles with patience and persistence, while someone with inconsistent thinking reacts emotionally and abandons effort prematurely. The difference lies not in intelligence or talent, but in the reliability of mental patterns. Consistency of thought also determines long-term direction. Small daily mental choices compound over time, shaping beliefs, expectations, and standards. What begins as a simple intentional thought becomes a guiding principle through repetition. As these principles solidify, they influence every area of life, from relationships to career decisions. When thought patterns are aligned with purpose and reinforced daily, success becomes predictable rather than accidental. Absolutely. Here's a powerful conclusion for your speech, ending on an inspiring and grateful note, perfect for keeping your audience motivated and engaged till the very end. Remember, everything in your life begins in your mind. The way you think, the questions you ask yourself, and the focus you choose every single day shape the reality you experience. Your mind is not just a tool, it is your most powerful weapon, capable of creating freedom, success, and fulfillment beyond anything you've imagined. Today, you have learned that changing your thoughts can change your emotions, your actions, and ultimately your destiny. The choice is now in your hands. Will you let your mind run on autopilot, or will you take control and shape your future with purpose and determination? Take what you've learned today, practice it consistently, and watch how your life transforms. Keep challenging your limits, asking empowering questions, and focusing on what matters most. You have the power within you, and now it's time to use it. Good luck on your journey. Stay disciplined, stay determined, and never underestimate the weapon that you carry with you every moment, your mind. Thank you for giving me your time today, and thank you for committing to creating a life that is truly extraordinary.